Welcome to all of you tuning in. We're on the last session of the day, empowering analysts with graph visualization. A couple of reminders, we will be sending an email with links to the presentations in the next day or so keep an eye out for that. And we are taking questions at the end of the session, so please don't hesitate to ask a question or two using the questions tab located at the top of your screen. Without further delay, I'll hand the floor over to Lance Walter, Chief Marketing Officer at Neo4j, to introduce our final speaker.
All right, we're very excited to wrap up today very strong. So Stuart Laurie is here from our pre-sales team. He's been with the company for 2.5 years as a senior pre-sales engineer. Prior to Neo4j, Stuart spent more than a decade at SmartLogic as a solutions consultant and a principal architect. Stuart has a bachelor's degree in computer science and biology from the University of Reading, and he started his career as a chemoinformatician at De Novo Pharmaceuticals. Stuart really is going to put all of us in the shoes of your end users and analysts and show us how Neo4j Bloom can help them explore and understand connected data. Welcome, Stuart. Bring us home strong.
Thanks, Lance, for the introduction. So this talk, we're going to talk around how to visualize graphs with Neo4j. Just a little background on myself. I'm one of the senior field engineers at Neo4j. So I've got this awesome role in Neo4j where I get to work with our customers. I get to take them on the graph journey. So that's often kind of starting out with prototyping, loading data, but then also, as we're kind of going to focus on in this talk, really about kind of seeing the power of the graph. And it's great, these moments, because I get to capture what really is those light bulb moments. And we've seen this a lot through lots of different customers. We've seen people, really get it. And people get it in different ways, and there's different levels of impact that different graph use cases can have for people. But on a number of different fraud use cases, I've seen kind of very similar sentences come out from people who've seen the graph for the first time and can really see what it can give them. And so we have these amazing kind of quotes that are things like, I can now do in 10 minutes. What literally took me a week to do before. And usually the reason that they know it took them a week before is they've actually just given us something that they've just completed so they can make sure that Neo4j is doing the right thing, so they make sure they can see the information that helped them make that decision. So it's really cool to kind of, see that excitement in real life. But when we focus more seriously on, what is the ROI of that? Well, of course, if you can identify risk much faster, there's two things you're going to get from that. So one is the ability to literally stop whatever transactions would have happened, whatever fraudulent activity would have happened in the week it took you to stop them. So you've got a huge potential ROI in terms of stopping fraud in its track. But you've also got that time saving for the analysts themselves. So now they can potentially go off and stop even more cases and block even more potential fraud. So being able to quickly and easily access the data and kind of understand the data gives these, two benefits that each are pretty huge. But obviously, visualization is this kind of big subject. There's lots of different use cases for graph in financial services. And what that means is there's lots of different data types. There's lots of different kind of graph structures. So that means one visualization tool might not be good for every use case. And it means that different people also have different views onto the same data. So that's what we want to look at when we think about visualization. There isn't this silver bullet of one visualization will solve everything. And that's what we're going to focus on too in the presentation. Just give you a flavor of a couple of different tools, looking at different problems to show that how they can solve them. When we think about Neo4j, we always think, the transactional workload that Neo4j handles. So being able to do very fast queries across a connected graph in milliseconds. That itself, as a use case, doesn't really need a visualization. It's API layer or potentially for things like predictive risk scoring. Then we think about the graph algorithms, the graph data science library. They're also using the data inside Neo4j and looking at the structure of that information to see how that can feed into analysis. So when we think about the users, then we've got, at least three, if not many more different types of users that might access the graph. So on one side, we've got developers. They're probably going into the graph to, explore, make sure data was loaded correctly, maybe have a look at performance of the graph. We've got then the analysts and data scientists, and those are the people we'll be kind of focusing on for today. And then we've also got those people who, in all honesty, if we think about, reporting success up to management, who in all likeliness don't actually care that there's a graph structure underneath. What they really want to see is, the benefit, the ROI that the graphs are bringing. So with both the flexibility or kind of change there is in the data that can be loaded into Neo4j and the different types of users that might want to access the graph, you can obviously imagine there's different visualization tools for different needs and for different use cases. And there's a few different kind of ways of thinking about that. So if we look at the slide here, at the top of the screen, we're thinking about out-of-the-box visualization tools that you can get immediate value out of. You deploy them, you configure them. They're somewhat customizable in terms of things like coloring and images and sizing within the tool. So it allows you to very easily and flexibly get in and start investigating the graph. And as I say, that's usually the best and fastest way to kind of prototype and understand the graph. When we look at the bottom half of the slide, there's more custom work that might need to go on. So Neo4j itself provides some solutions. They're templates that can increase the speed to deployment and are specific for some various use cases, including anti-money laundering. And then at the total custom end, there's the ability to come in and totally create your own custom workflow or UI based on, either commercial or open source libraries. So when you think about visualization options, you've obviously got to weigh that in mind. Do you want something to get started quick and easily so you can explore, promote the value of the graph and get value from the graph, versus do you want something that's customized and maybe tailored to a workflow that an analyst's already using? So you got those choices, but they don't always have to be choices either. You can combine them as well. And we see that in a lot of prospects and customers. There's certain use cases that actually just the out-of-the-box visualization is good for. And then, as you maybe go to production or expand the audience of visualization of use of the graph, then you give them their own custom tools. But if we're going to explore in this session the graph, we need to kind of understand the workflow that we're exploring for. So as I said, we're going to pick the kind of the data scientist or analyst workflow, and very broadly speaking, it starts off with some kind of identification of bad actors or bad information or suspicious activity. So that can be identified in many different ways. Obviously, there can be external alerts, internal alerts. Of course, a lot of people now are using machine learning. They're doing kind of predictive risk scoring. So somewhere and somehow you're getting this alert that there's a suspicious thing going on. The analyst then has to, collect all of the data they need to make their analysis. And because often what we see is it's coming from, 5, 6, 7, 8 different systems. If not, we've heard literally 40, 50, 60 in some cases. But, let's assume 5, 6, 7 different systems. They've then got to combine that data. They've got to connect it all. They've got to match it up. They've got to align it. And only then really can they get into the analyzing phase, the bit that they actually really, are experts in and need to do. So once the analysis is done, then of course they need to, enforce on that. So usually that's some kind of sharing with a legal team, creating a case so that they can, actually action shutting down a fraudster, closing down an account, flagging transactions, whatever that might be. So that's what we're going to kind of think about as we look at the visualization tools. But another amusing thing that we tend to see in customers, and it probably isn't amusing, but I find it so, that everyone's still stuck in a lot of cases on Excel, right? So they're actually, that whole process of combining data and aligning it is actually really, starting off with one Excel file, going to your IT team, getting them to, write a query against another system to pull you back some more data, then bringing back some more data, trying to marry it up. So essentially what ends to happen, what happens in the end, I should say, is that they're staring into the matrix. So for those, the uneducated people in the audience, looking at all of those spreadsheets and understanding the facts and understanding the value from that is really like looking at the matrix. We don't get it. Of course, analysts, have been doing that for years. They've trained to do that, or they've trained themselves to do that, so they can see the value. But what we really want to do with visualization again is present a picture that can, that can give us the answer where 100 spreadsheets wouldn't. And so as we look at our first visualization, it's often actually another question that people tend to ask is, how quickly can analysts adopt a visualization tool? And it's actually pretty easy. I mean, some people, take a few minutes just to get familiar with the data model they're seeing. Everyone has to do that. But as soon as you see that, you can start to understand the data set. So here we've got some personal information. So on the left-hand side, we've got people. So we've got account holders or clients. The two green ones on the left-hand side, you can trace their relationships down to addresses, to social security numbers, to phone numbers. So that, tells a nice little story that there's two people living at the same address. One of them we've expanded social security number and phone number for. But as we look at the kind of the middle and the right-hand side, where we've got those big red circles with the nice warning triangles in them, they're the ones that in this case we are kind of identifying as being suspicious. Being suspicious in this case because they all share a social security number, and then if we look on the right-hand side, they're also sharing kind of phone information. And that's, most of the time just not things that you should find in the data. So of course, sharing phone numbers, addresses is somewhat reasonable, but sharing social security numbers is pretty much a no. So instead of looking at all of the individual spreadsheets and trying to tie them together, we're getting, a pretty easy picture to understand. So I had this statement earlier where I said, some of the analysts were telling us that they can now do in 10 minutes what they used to be able to do in a week. So I have obviously set myself a challenge for this. So let's have 10 minutes exploring a graph and see what we can find. So what we'll do here then is have a look at one of the visualization tools, and we'll start off in Neo4j Blue. So as we mentioned, this is kind of an ad hoc exploration tool that'll allow us to get in and explore the graph. And the first thing we can do, let's imagine we've got this, this account or person that we have some suspicion around. We can come in and we can start typing in their name, and we can see that we've got, actually if I take it back a few, we can see that we've actually got quite a few different people in here, but I'm going to specifically hone in on Kimberly Gordon. So nice. We've got Kimberly up on screen. If we're interested, we can go look at her details. In fact, we're not storing much on this node, just a little bit of information. What we then can do is start to expand the relationships. So as we kind of expand everything around Kimberly, we start to see the data model. So what we can see here then is Kimberly, and then we can see things like her social security number, her email, and the phone number that she has. And in this case, she's also got some transactions, so we can see those as well. But if our use case immediately is just to find, are there any other people that are sharing the personal information that they're using? What we might be interested in is focusing in on those items rather than the transaction. So we can come in, we can then just remove the transactions from screen, they're not important to us right now, and we can start to expand on email, phone, and the social security number. So when we start to do that, what we get to see is pretty similar to what we saw in the diagram. We're now starting to see lots of people share the same information. So immediately we've got something suspicious. So I said 10 minutes. We've already done something in a couple of minutes that definitely warrants further investigation. So do a little bit more investigation. Let's see what else is happening here. So if we look at the clients again, maybe we're interested in, who's sending them money. So we're looking at transfers coming in to those people. So we can see that these two people don't really have many transactions coming in. These two people have lots more. And actually what you'll kind of see here is the size of the node is pretty much based on how many transactions are coming into them. So it's actually based on a PageRank score that we calculated in the database directly. So now you can see, who are more interesting people to look at. If more people are getting, money coming in or out, then maybe they're the ones we can focus on if we need to prioritize. So here we can see money coming in. And let's do the same thing going out. Let's see who these people are paying. So if we have a look at the transactions that they performed, and let's just focus in on all of those transactions and see who they send that money to. What we've also got here is actually all of them paying a single person. So not only do they have some, weirdness in that they're sharing these contact details, personal information, but actually the money flow might all be coming into them and then being transferred out to this third party. So a couple of things there that could be suspicious and could be interesting to investigate further. Another flag that we already have in the data that I haven't talked about is actually a flag for fraudulent transactions. So if we decided we wanted a little bit of extra styling and wanted to apply a coloring to those transactions, we can actually see that that all of the transactions flowing into that person have been flagged already. So again, it's a nice validation that we're seeing data that they might have acted on in the past. And as I say, that's typically the first thing we do in Neo4j is actually just, make sure the graph validates some of the things that you already know, are fraudulent, because that gives you the best, warm and fuzzy feeling that it's going to be successful. And now you can go off and explore new things. But there's another couple of cool features that we can use in Bloom to help as well. So when we first did this, we started building out things, right click by right click. And we kind of probably already know that there's some patterns that we want to look at. So social security number being shared by more than one person is an interesting pattern. So in Bloom, what we can do is search for that. If I search for patterns in the graph, I could do something like this, where I say, give me a social security number that is connected to more than one client node. So we're not being as specific anymore. We're not looking for, a specific person or account or transaction to review. We're now saying, let's take a pattern and see what matches in our graph. And as we do that, in this graph, you'll actually find quite a few things that come back out. So we've got about 3,000 nodes coming back out. So we've got, 1,900 and so clients sharing 790 or so social security numbers. That's kind of, your hit list for at least, this kind of use case is to, these are all of the things you're going to want to investigate. Someone having no social security, someone having a shared social security number is never a good thing. Maybe it's data cleanliness that needs to happen. Maybe the data is dirty and somehow these shouldn't be connected. Or maybe these are all instances of, stolen identities or some other fraud. And again, you're often presented with this kind of, level of information, 2,000 nodes. You're obviously going to want a starting point. And that's, why having things like value, like the page rank, or, even things like how many transactions or transaction value that's going through these accounts can be really important to kind of give you prioritization. So we may just want to deselect everything. Maybe, we're really interested in these nodes. So we can just select them again, get rid of everything else. And now we can start to, again, look at the surrounding neighborhood. So we can come in here, and as we select them all, we can again start to expand all of the related nodes. Again, we might not be interested in transactions, so let's close them out for now. And we can start to explore the different relationships. So we see this has phone, has an additional person. As we start to explore that, let's see what this phone has. That's the same. And if we then start to expand some of these email addresses. So in this case, actually, it's not too bad. We have got one social security number being shared, but there's not much else being shared. So actually, that's a good way of validating that even though we've got a suspicious connection, there doesn't seem to be, that much else being shared. It's not like a big network of people. So talking about that big network, then there's easier ways to look at that as well. So again, we've been kind of building up the graph step by step, exploring. Again, what we can do in Bloom is to write a search query that will allow us to automate some of that expansion. So in my search query, I might do something like, give me all the people who are connected to a specific person. And let's just pick the first person in the list. So instead of going in there searching for the person and then doing the expansion manually, again, we can come in and kind of make that, visualization appear more easily, more automatically. And the way we do that, as I said, is search phrase. So it's basically a cipher query tied into a common phrase where you can give specific values to it. So it's somewhat dynamic. Once we've seen, the group, in this case, we've got lots of people. Again, what might be interesting is doing that expansion on transactions themselves. So let's see, what transactions are being performed. And let's see who they're being performed to. So again, if I just pick transactions, expand to, we can now see, just like we did in the first example, this new node come up, which is kind of interesting. They weren't connected by any of the personal information, any of the social security numbers, the email addresses, or phone numbers, but they're connected by all of the payments seem to be going to them. So again, something, suspicious, probably, that you want to investigate. And as we turned on the coloring for specific transactions that were already flagged as fraudulent, we can also see some interesting things here. So we can see that, most of these transactions have already been flagged. So that's, again, another good suspicion point. But we're actually seeing more transactions here as well. So again, if we wanted to see, relative value of transaction, we could do something like a second rule where we pick the size based on, the amount in the node. And again, that gives us kind of a little prioritization capability where we can come in and say, okay, well, one of the biggest transactions already been blocked. A lot of these that have been blocked are actually pretty small. But then there's a couple of, still decent sized transactions that need to be blocked. So again, it allows you to get in, explore, and act on those. So when we say act, we said the end of our workflow is going to be some way of sending this information out to, an enforcement team, whatever they may be. And so in Bloom, what you can do is quickly do that. You can just export the graph as CSV. So we have unfortunately gone back to a CSV format at the end, but at least we didn't have to use 100 to get there in the first place. So that's the end of the first demo, and hopefully that should have been pretty much on time. So that's what we've been exploring. So the first one, if you think about it, is really around synthetic fraud, stolen identity information, looking at where, people are using the same information over and over again. and then looking a little bit at the transactions and the flow of money. So what we had in that graph, as we see the data model underneath, was the clients, all of their information, and then information around transactions and who they're paying. And what we saw in the Bloom demonstration was actually just using some of the parameters we pre-calculated. So we found those influential nodes, those nodes that were receiving a lot of transactions using PageRank, and we'd used also community detection, weakly connected components. That's one of the ones that helped us kind of find those groups easily when we did the clients connected to search. That's the first example. Next, we can have a look at a different example and a different tool. We can go in and have a look at suspicious account access. So if we think about this data model is going to be account number at the center. Obviously, account holder belongs to or owns that account and potentially many accounts. And then we're going to look at the different types of access that you're going to have to that account and see if we can spot any suspicious behavior in the account access. And what we're going to track, of course, most people probably now do online banking. We're going to track information on sessions. So, who's logging in from what device, what IP address are they coming in, what are they doing when they access the account, and similar from the call perspective. So if you're phoning up customer support for a bank or using like an automated system to do stuff, you can also kind of track that information. So this is broadly what we'll be seeing. And then for each of the call and session, you might understand that there's a set of actions that might go on in that call. So let's come back and now have a quick look at a second tool and the second scenario. So in this scenario, we're going to use Linkuris to do the exploration. So it's one of the, the many tools that are out there in terms of visualization. It's one of the partners of Neo4j, and it's actually, to be honest, the one I've used a couple of times in customer projects. So really, presenting this because it's familiar to me. And there's a few extra features that Linkuris kind of offers over Bloom, which are things like, more workflow and a few different kind of ways of viewing data, a few different layouts and styles. So I thought it was really interesting when we see a different data set to also see the different visualization. And we talked about the process, again, of enforcement being, we have to start off somewhere. We've got to start off with this, some kind of notification that we've got suspicious activity. So in Linkuris, what they've got is an alerting functionality. So what you can come do in here is actually, any analyst, anyone who knows Cypher, that is kind of a prerequisite, knowing Cypher, but anyone who knows Cypher to come in and create their own alerts. So it becomes much more kind of self-service in terms of configuring, what information you might be alerted to. And when we get into an alert, it's fairly simple. It's looking across the graph, looking at all of the account numbers, and anything with a specific threshold will then have, a further risk score. So of course, don't take too much, credence into the risk score itself. Risk score is one of those, still, what's the word? Not secret sauce, I guess, of most applications, right? Everyone's calculating their risk scores in their own proprietary way. So it's just the idea that you can calculate something, we can have it as an ordered list, and now we get a focused place to start our investigation. There's also some cool features in here where, as you start to investigate, or once you complete the investigation, you can confirm these as being suspicious, dismiss them if you've identified them as not suspicious. So it gives you like this workflow that makes it easier to track what you have done, what you haven't done. So that's also kind of a cool feature. But if we come in and open the account and start to explore, what we can then see is all of the information that we've got in the data set. So as we start, we're going to see the main account holder, and then we're going to see all of the calls that are coming in. So everything in the small icons, the little headsets, calls coming in, call accessing that account. And anything in the blue is the sessions. So we might want to go one step out, then we select everything and expand all neighbors. And again, it's kind of really interesting. And one of the things that we do tend to see people fall foul of when they first started looking at visualization is not being selective enough. So what I've done here is just expand everything. And actually, in reality, I've got stuff that I don't need. I've got all of these actions for the call. You know, these are the things that they've done when they're on the call or done when they're in the web session. And I don't actually care about those right now. So you can easily kind of, reverse out that thought. And actually, if we go back to thinking about something we did in Bloom, we can do a similar thing here. I don't even want to right-click twice or 3 times. I just want to get the answer I'm interested in. So I can pre-configure queries here. Again, just straight cipher, where I can decide what information I want to present up front. So if I have this account holder and I just want to know everybody who's accessed that account, I can just make that query just simply jump 2 hops out and give me all the information that I need. So again, once you start to explore, once you start to find those patterns that you're commonly interested in, you can just re-encode them either, as the search phrase in Bloom, or as the saved query in Linkurious, just to make the second and third exploration just so much easier and faster. So what are we seeing here, and what might we want to do next? So we're seeing here a few different calls. We're seeing calls coming in from 4 different numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're seeing session information coming in from 1 device and 2 different IPs. So, the web sessions kind of look fine. I mean, a single device accessing the account, probably not an issue. Coming in from 2 IP addresses, maybe that's a mobile device that's being used in 2 different locations. So again, pretty easily explainable. As we see the top sections, we can see, lots of calls coming in from this number, a few calls coming in from this one, and just a few coming in from the others. So one thing we might think about looking at is time. So maybe we're interested in, how these calls happen over time. So we use a, fairly simple time slider. It's a pretty cool feature. But you can then just pick, I want to look at my call and session times. We can see all of the dates now that these things have been going on. So it's actually limited, I think, to the last 60 days, I think I configured this for. And now I can go in and see, over time, can we spot anything interesting? And as we come back out and zoom back out a little bit to see more of the graph, as we go across time, what we start to see is anything that's not in the valid time range starts to get grayed out. And we're really seeing that this top group, the one with frequent number of calls, those calls are coming in, over the whole duration of this timeline. Same with sessions, they seem to be evenly distributed. Same with this group here. But as we start to kind of, go down to just the last few days, we start to see this number, not having been grayed out. So basically all of these are kind of fairly fresh calls. And of course that might be a key if someone's coming in and say, hey, I've just had some random transactions coming in on my account. Well, that is probably what you're going to want to look at. Is there any new access that previously wasn't there? And so this node might be an interesting thing to look at. Then if we actually just expand one more and get our account holder, what we also might be interested in is something like location. So again, everybody knows the scenario where, a lot of organizations now have to tell whether you're going to be traveling. Because of course, traveling and having access from different locations is another good indicator of, whether there's suspicious activity. So we could, in this case, just flip it to a map view, and again, easily see that we've got our main account holder. Their address is somewhere in the Bay, or somewhere on the other side of the Bay. Then we've got 2 of their phone numbers, the most common phone numbers. Again, Bay Area based seems pretty good. And then we've got these 2 ones that we already kind of decided were a little bit suspicious, coming in from the East Coast. So again, there's always could be possible, reasonable explanations. Maybe they've gone on holiday, they're calling in from over there. But again, could be another indicator of suspicious activity. So different ways to get in and explore the data, time, geo. Another way, of course, is just actually seeing that if we look at these numbers, this one and this one as well, we find that it's telling us there's more to explore. So as we start to expand and do another save query, let's find other accounts that these numbers have accessed, we again start to get this much more convoluted picture, much more interesting picture, where we can see that, even though these two are both phoning in on that account, they're also phoning in on this other account as well. So that, itself could be interesting. If we right-click and expand, the accounts over here, what we see is possibly the end of a network. So this, we could interpret to be, this might be the account holder phoning in, and this might be someone trying to get fraudulent access to many accounts. To gain access, I should say. Yeah, many accounts. And what we can also see through the styling is that we've actually put a little flag here to say, based on the events that have gone on in the call, is there something that looks suspicious? Maybe they could not authenticate as they got on the call, for example, or same with, web sessions. So here we've also got this kind of little flag that all of these have had, no access. They haven't really been able to get to the account. So again, 3 or 4 different ways that you can get in there and kind of explore. So, through timeline to see, have things changed recently, behavior patterns. We can look at, all the different accounts that are being accessed from a number. We can see things like where there hasn't been successful attempts. And of course, again, there could be positive explanations for that. I often forget my PIN number for phoning in, so it could just be they dialed in 5 times with the wrong number. But all of these things together could lead you to suspicion. And that brings us to what next? Because of course, again, that workflow should end with some kind of enforcement. And what you've probably learned from this talk so far is obviously, I'm not a subject matter expert in fraud analysis. As I said at the start, my role is to go in and help people. So I know, enough to see patterns, but I might want help from someone who really does know what they're talking about. So what I can do is I can just save this. So we actually have the ability to save, please investigate. So we can save this visualization. We can actually come back to it later ourselves, or we can share it out. So we can say, hey, somebody who really actually knows what they're doing, please come and look at this. I think this is a little bit suspicious. Please validate, and then we can go to that next step. So you've got this additional, built-in workflow. So you can get review, you can get peer collaboration on reviewing the graph. And again, that's super cool and super helpful. So that's probably when I was going to finish with the second demo. So if we come back out, in both cases, we've seen, very similar workflows. So there's some way to identify suspicious activity. In the Bloom example, we just had a starting point, or we did a pattern search. We didn't have to do any collection data and combining data, which is awesome. Everything was in Neo4j already. So it's then straight to the task of analyzing. And hopefully in both cases, I kept to more or less my 10 minutes of, hey, you can explore a lot in 10 minutes. Yeah, it does take a little bit of, getting used to the tool itself and seeing the graph in that way. But hopefully it's super obvious that there's a lot of value that can be driven from investigating the graph. And then, of course, in the 2 different ways, we enforced. So one is like here, go send to a second level to investigate. And in Bloom, it was explored as CSV. Actually, tools have, similar capabilities in things like exporting versus sending off for review. So again, when you do analysis of tools, you'll look for things like that. The other thing that workflow, that collaboration can give us, which is really cool, is A third kind of benefit of visualization that we didn't mention right at the start. We mentioned the getting faster to find things that we want to act on. We mentioned making it easier for the analyst to do the work that will be more efficient. But when we think about this kind of collaboration workflow, what we can also think about is now we can expand the audience of who can access the graph and who can maybe do some triage before we get to that much more detailed level. So it gives us, lots of different ways that we can improve on on specific processes, but still have the checks and balances we need in place to make sure that we're enforcing in the right way. So the final one we'll do just very, very quickly. As I mentioned, there's that third persona, which is, of course, when all of this good work is done, someone wants to know about it, right? We're not stopping this just for the fun of things, even though, we always want good outcomes to happen. What we really want to do is, make sure that everybody knows, what's going on in terms of, what potential fraud we're avoiding. For some services, that's its critical component, right? That's how you differentiate. Hey, we've managed to, stop all of this happening. Our service is safer than somebody else's. Or it could just be, we're saving ourselves money, or saving ourselves potential loss, I should say. So when we think about reporting, what we've got is recently released a BI connector, and that allows us to just really easily hook up BI tools to Neo4j. And so we can quickly do a showcase in Tableau, and it's super simple. What we want to do is just come in here, connect up to Neo4j. We've done that. We see all of the information that we have in Neo4j, both our node, our labels, and our relationships if we're interested. My query is super simple. I just want to find all of the stuff that we've blocked and then chuck it into a dashboard to say, hey, this is the total amount that we've blocked, and just a very, very simple a very, very simple example of a breakdown of that blocking. So that's all, a reporting tool, hopefully needs to do, gives that high level value. We don't need to spend 10 minutes on this one. It's really about, someone coming in, identifying that this project is giving ROI. And it's kind of funny here as well, these numbers you can see start off, for 4 months or so, getting fairly low number of kind of close events, all in the range of, maybe 50 to nearly 100,000 in terms of total value. And then, obviously, this point is where they deployed Neo4j. I would definitely say so. So what they got in now is through that analyst efficiency, they can now be able to close more cases. And, hopefully through some of the features like the graph algorithm, understanding the structure and flow of information and flow of money potentially, they can now start to get more value or stop higher value fraud. So here we've got, more cases, but then as we build up, we're actually getting a smaller number of cases, 93, but totally they're blocking, more fraud, I guess. So, stopping that happen. So again, that's what people want to hear. They want to hear that, justifying the project, justifying that they're now the leaders in how they do analysis and resolution. So what have we seen? What we've seen is someone who, loves graphs, who isn't an expert in this area at all, trying to show you how visualization can be valuable on some very fake data. What do you need to do now, of course, is see how these tools can be worked on your very real data. So, hopefully everyone's enjoyed the session. Again, it's, really just to give you an idea of what's possible, how some of these analyses can work. But again, of course, we don't have real data. This is all simulated. And we really want to be able to spend the time with you on your data so that we can get to these kind of outcomes. So once again, I appreciate the attention. Thank you, and we'll open up to questions.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Stuart. I just love the visualization and the customization. It just makes everything, because similar to what we say, you can just spot everything so much faster when you see the visualization of it. And I appreciate your amusement with Excel spreadsheets. So we have had
It happens too often. It surprises me still.
I think I'm guilty of that, but we've had some questions that have come in, and you've touched on a few of these things, but I'll ask them again. And I also want to remind for those of folks in the audience, if you do have questions, please go ahead and submit them in the questions tab. If we don't get to all the questions during the session, someone from Neo4j will reach out to you directly. And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll just take a couple of these that have come in throughout. One of them is about visualization tools. You touched on a couple different ones, but can you give us more of a comparison of the different visualization tools?
Yeah. So I deliberately didn't do that as part of this talk. As I kind of set up, visualization is very specific. It's kind of specific to the data set, the workflows, the processes that you use in a project. So what I'd really say is just, come talk to us. There are a lot of, really good tools out there. As we mentioned, there's Linkurious, there's GraphXR, there's Keylines, there's a bunch of open source libraries. So there's lots of good stuff out there. I'd say just, as you get your graph visualization or even the graph project stood up, just come talk to us, and we can kind of, understand your requirements a little bit better. You understand whether, an out-of-the-box tool will fit, or whether a solution or a custom build is something that might be needed. But yeah, lots of good stuff out there. Just come talk to us, and we'll help you out.
Great, thank you. And I know that part of your presentation was this, like, in 10 minutes, you can see this. But someone did ask more specifically, like, what does it take to become productive using a visualization tool? Is there more to it than the 10 minutes that you showed us?
Yeah, definitely. I probably did both projects a disservice in, actually the capability and the features and how you would use them, how you could filter in on more information, slice and dice the information. So, apologies to both tools for doing a disservice. But it is actually, usually straightforward. The way we typically work is, we'll usually set it up for people first time. And then, the best way is just have like an interactive session. There's literally like 5, 10, 15 minutes of just getting people familiar with, what the nodes are, what's in them, what the relationships are. But as soon as they start to see that, they, really pick up. And it's kind of funny because a lot of the conversations I have there are just like, well, why can't I see this data? Why can't I do that? And then they realize that they didn't put it in the graph. So it's just like, yeah, go get that data, and now you can have it in the visualization as well. So it's kind of super cool conversations, but yeah, it's usually fairly easy. There's a lot more features to these tools, but the basics get picked up pretty easy.
Excellent. So we have time for one more, and I picked this one specifically because I think you're gonna like to answer it. Not that you don't like answering all of them, but this one in particular. So it says this person has more of a comment and then a question. So it sounds like you have a fun job. So how do I get a job at Neo4j?
Yeah, I totally love working for Neo4j. As I say, I have a lot of fun with our customers, and I do think this is a cool job. Come and apply. I think we've still got a fair number of positions open up on the website. Have a look out there, ping me, ping one of us, and we're always looking for good people.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to thank you again for your time. We are out of time for today. This has been such a great day of graphs for financial services. I'm glad that everyone could participate. Stuart, thank you for closing us up. And everyone in the audience, we will have recordings and slide decks available to you within about 24 hours or so. And I just want you to look forward to our next connections that will be taking place in June. So stay tuned for more information about that, and have a great day. Thanks so much for being a part of this.
Thank you.